Hello, today we're going to be reading The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame. So this is Chapter 3, Part 1, The Wildwood. The mole had long wanted to make the acquaintance of the badger. He seemed, by all accounts, to be such an important personage and, though rarely visible, to make this unseen influence felt by everybody about the place. But whenever the mole mentioned his wish to the water rat, he always found himself put off. "It's all right," the rat would say. "Badger'll turn up some day or the other. He's always turning up. And then I'll introduce you. The best of fellows. But you must not only take him as you find him, but when you find him." "Couldn't you ask him here? Dinner or something?" said the mole. "He wouldn't come," replied the rat simply. "Badger hates society, and invitations, and dinner, and all that sort of thing." "Well then, supposing we go and call on him," suggested the mole. "Well, I'm sure he wouldn't like that at all," said the rat, quite alarmed. "He's so very shy, he'd be sure to be offended. I've never even ventured to call on him at his own home myself, though I know him so well. Besides, we can't. It's quite out of the question, because he lives in the very middle of the wildwood." "Well, supposing he does," said the mole. "You told me the wildwood was all right, you know." "Oh, I know, so it is," replied the rat evasively. "But I think we won't go there just now. Not just yet. It's a long way, and he wouldn't be at home at this time of year anyhow, and he'll be coming along someday if you'll wait quietly." The mole had to be content with this, but the badger never came along, and every day brought its amusements, and it was not till summer was long over, and cold and frost and miry ways kept them much indoors, and the swollen river raced past outside their windows with a speed that mocked at boating of any sort or kind, that he found his thoughts dwelling again with much persistence on the solitary gray badger, who lived his own life by himself in his hole in the middle of the wildwood. In the winter-time, the rat slept a great deal, retiring early and rising late. During his short day, he sometimes scribbled poetry or did other small domestic jobs about the house. And of course, there were always animals dropping in for a chat, and consequently, there was a good deal of storytelling and comparing notes on the past summer and all its doings. Such a rich chapter it had been when one came to look back on it all, with illustrations so numerous and so very highly colored. The pageant of the riverbank had marched steadily along, unfolding itself in scenic pictures that succeeded each other in stately procession. Purple loosestrife arrived early, shaking luxuriant tangled locks along the edge of the mirror whence its own face laughed back at it. Willow herb, tender and wistful, like a pink sunset cloud, was not slow to follow. Comfrey, the purple hand in hand with the white, crept forward to take its place in the line. And at last one morning the diffident and delaying dog rose stepped delicately on the stage, and one knew, as if string music had announced it in stately chords that strayed into a gavotte, that June at last was here. One member of the company was still awaited, the shepherd boy for the nymphs to woo, the knight for whom the ladies waited at the window, the prince that was to kiss the sleeping summer back to life and love. But when meadow-sweet, debonair, and odorous in amber jerkin moved graciously to his place in the group, then the play was ready to begin. "Are you going to say hello to me?" Hello. I'm Mr. Toad." "Hello, Mr. Toad."
But my friends call me Toady.
"Hello, Mr. Toady."
I'd really like to read.
Would you like to? Okay.
Where were you?
I'm right here. And what a play it has been.
Maybe I'll finish the rest of part 1.
I'm a little bit stiff.
And what a play it had been. Drowsy animals snug in their holes while wind and rain were battering at their doors recalled still keen mornings an hour before sunrise, when the white mist, as yet undispersed, clung closely along the surface of the water. Then the shock of the early plunge, the scamper along the bank, and the radiant transformation of earth, air, and water, when suddenly the sun was with them again, and gray was gold, and color was born, and sprang out of the earth once more. They recalled the languorous siesta of hot midday, deep in green undergrowth, the sun striking through in tiny golden shafts and spots, the boating and bathing of the afternoon, the rambles along dusty lanes and through yellow cornfields, and the long, cool evening at last when so many threads were gathered up, so many friendships rounded, and so many adventures planned for the morrow. There was plenty to talk about on those short winter days when the animals found themselves round the fire. Still, the mole had a good deal of spare time on his hands, and so one afternoon, when the rat in his armchair before the blaze was alternately dozing and trying over rhymes that wouldn't fit, he formed the resolution to go out by himself and explore the wild wood, and perhaps strike up an acquaintance with Mr. Badger. It was a cold, still afternoon with a hard, steely sky overhead when he slipped out of the warm parlor into the open air. The country lay bare and entirely leafless around him, and he thought that he had never seen so far and so intimately into the insides of things as on the winter day when nature was deep in her annual slumber and seemed to have kicked the clothes off. Copses, dells, quarries, and all hidden places, which had been mysterious mines for exploration in leafy summer, now exposed themselves and their secrets pathetically, and seemed to ask him to overlook their shabby poverty for a while. Still, they could riot in rich masquerade as before, and trick and entice him with the old deceptions. It was pitiful in a way, and yet cheering, even exhilarating. He was glad that he liked the country undecorated, hard, stripped of its finery. He had got down to the bare bones of it, and they were fine and strong and simple. He did not want the warm clover and the play of seeding grasses. The screens of quickset, the billowy drapery of beech and elm seemed best away. And with great cheerfulness of spirit, he pushed on towards the wild wood, which lay before him low and threatening, like a black reef in some still southern sea. There was nothing to alarm him at first entry. Twigs crackled under his feet, logs tripped him, funguses on stumps resembled caricatures, and startled him for the moment by their likeness to something familiar and far away. But that was all fun and exciting. It led him on, and he penetrated to where the light was less, and trees crouched nearer and nearer, and holes made ugly mouths at him on either side. Everything was very still now. The dusk advanced on him steadily, rapidly gathering in behind and before, and the light seemed to be draining away like floodwater. Then the faces began. It was over his shoulder, and indistinctly that he first thought he saw a face, a little evil, wedge-shaped face looking out at him from a hole. When he turned and confronted it, the thing had vanished. He quickened his pace, telling himself cheerfully not to begin imagining things, or there would be simply no end to it. He passed another hole and another, and then yes, certainly a little narrow face with hard eyes had flashed up for an instant from a hole and was gone. He hesitated, braced himself up for an effort, and strode on. Then, suddenly, and as if it had been so all the time, every hole far and near, and there were hundreds of them, seemed to possess its face, coming and going rapidly, all fixing on him glances of malice and hatred, all hard-eyed and evil and sharp. If he could only get away from the holes in the banks, he thought, there would be no more faces. He swung off the path and plunged into the untrodden places of the wood. And then the whistling began. Very faint and shrill it was, and far behind, when first he heard it. But somehow it made him hurry forward. Then, still very faint and shrill, it sounded far ahead of him, and made him hesitate and want to go back. As he halted in indecision, it broke out on either side, and seemed to be caught up and passed on throughout the whole length of the wood to its furthest limit. They were up and alert and ready, evidently, whoever they were. And he was alone and unarmed and far from any help, and the night was closing in. Ooh, scary. Then the pattering began. He thought it was only falling leaves at first, so slight and delicate was the sound of it. Then, as it grew, it took a regular rhythm, and he knew it for nothing else but the pat, pat, pat of little feet, still a very long way off. Was it in front or behind? It seemed to be the first one, then the other, then both. It grew and it multiplied till from every quarter, as he listened anxiously, leaning this way and that, it seemed to be closing in on him. As he stood still to hearken, a rabbit came running hard towards him through the trees. He waited, expecting him to slacken pace or to swerve from him into a different course. Instead, the animal almost brushed him as he dashed past, his face set and hard, his eyes staring. "Get out of this, you fool! Get out!" the mole heard him mutter as he swung round a stump and disappeared down a friendly burrow. The pattering increased till it sounded like sudden hail on the dry leaf carpet spread around him. The whole wood seemed running now, running hard, hunting, chasing, closing in round something or somebody. In panic, he began to run too aimlessly, he knew not whither. He ran up against things, he fell over things and into things, he darted under things and dodged round things. At last, he took refuge in the deep, dark hollow of an old beech tree, which offered shelter and concealment, perhaps even safety, but who could tell? Anyhow, he was too tired to run any further and could only snuggle down into the dry leaves, which had drifted into the hollow, and hope he was safe for the first time. And as he lay there, panting and trembling, and listened to the whistlings and the patterings outside, he knew it at last in all its fullness, that dread thing which other little dwellers in field and hedgerow had encountered here, and known as their darkest moment, that thing which the rat had vainly tried to shield him from, the terror of the wild wood. I hope you enjoyed part 1. Stay tuned tomorrow for part 2 of chapter 3. And we look forward to seeing you. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.